Breaking news right now. Core sector number has come in at 5.7. Let's go straight to Latha Venkatesh for the analysis and the conversation.
Well, it certainly looks like this is a very good number at 5.2%, the core sector. Of course, April was an excellent number at 8.5%, but we were disappointed in May with a 2.8%. So this makes the number as good as the April-May average. June has come out at an average of April and May, while it's a steep fall that you see in May. If you take the average of April and May, then that's what you have got in June. So that's a fairly decent number. The best performers are actually the cement sector and the electricity sector. Oh, in fact, there are several good performers. Good performance coming in from coal, which is a huge 12%. A good performance coming in from fertilizers at 9.8. Fertilizer, of course, has been a standout performer for the last, 10, 11 months. And cement coming in at 10.3%, and electricity, again, a fairly consistent performer, coming in at 8.1%. So it's firing on several cylinders: coal, fertilizer, cement and electricity. Steel is tepid at 2.4%, but remember, several months it has even contracted. So we will take 2.4 with some relief. Refinery products is bad at 3.5. Natural gas contracted and crude oil contracted, but natural gas anyway is not a very big weight in the index. It's just crude oil that has disappointed. That's the story then. It's the first numbers you are getting for the month of June, and you have to say that this is a good precursor for the industrial output numbers that will come by the 12th of August. Soumya Kanti Ghosh, Chief Economic Advisor at State Bank of India, has joined us. Soumya, 5.2%, a good start to the June numbers?
Yeah, I think to ask me about the headline numbers at 5.2% is obviously an encouraging number, and the statistics which you read out on the cement front, on the fertilizer front, and also on the electricity front looks all encouraging. But I am still skeptical whether such a high core sector number will actually translate into a better IIP number for the latest month. Okay. Because we have seen in the past that the relationship between the core sector and the IIP is actually getting a little bit divorced from several months now. And if you actually look into the credit growth numbers, as of now, the credit flow to the infrastructure sectors, that doesn't look too encouraging for me to say that whether that will translate into a better IIP number as such.
No, that point can be taken, but Soumya, I'm coming to you in a minute. We also have Siddharth Sanyal, the Chief Economist at Barclays, joining us. Siddharth, your take, 5.2%, strong performance coming in from coal, electricity, cement, fertilizers, all of them nearly double digits or even higher than double digits.
Sure. Prima facie, good number, but what's happening here is the core sector number had been fluctuating a number of times. We have seen the number fluctuating in the recent months. So we have seen numbers in the range of around 8%, 6%, but at the same time, the very next month, it comes to at 3%. So the number is a bit fluctuating. The second point is that the relationship between core sector and IIP also is questionable. And again, there is a bit of disconnect often between the IIP number as well as the industrial GDP number. So it's a little unclear which number to follow. What you said is more important to me. Some of the segments like coal and electricity is showing steady good progress, which is encouraging. But as a whole, I'll take this number with a pinch of salt.
Okay, maybe this number alone, but Soumya, to you as well. The PMI numbers today came in at 51.8, a shade better than the previous 51.7, and we were very brightly told by the Nikkei guys that the PMI is the highest number since April. As well, the Maruti sales and the Eicher motor sales were good, even if Ashok Leyland sales were not very good. Given all these complex of growth numbers, do you think growth is likely to be better in the second quarter than in the first?
Yeah, I think if you ask me from the purely from the statistical point of view, the second quarter growth will be better than the first quarter. But if you just ask me about the index, for example, the PMI index, which is at 51.8, you said, and our index also, which we published last month for the month of August, was also in the early 50s. That means it's very low growth. So
Okay.
that's the point over here. Even if it is, say, for example, even if you are saying it's the highest since April, its growth is not going beyond 50 to 53,
Yep.
which is actually a breakout index in terms of a better growth. So from that point of view, I still believe that the IIP numbers will not show any dramatic improvement in the next couple of months, possible in the second half. And regarding a specific point on the sales, the passenger car sales, which Marutis have reported a good number, yes, that's an heartening sign. But if you actually look into the all these numbers which come in terms of and try to construct a growth,
Okay.
you will see that they are all putting the point in different directions.
Oh, right. And now, as we chat with you, we are getting some explosively breaking news. RBI releases guidelines for on-tap licensing of private banks, of universal private sector banks. This is a huge news which a lot of people have been waiting for. In a bit, we will try and get you a lot of the NBFC companies that have been hungrily waiting for RBI to release these guidelines. Remember, companies like L&T Finance, Edelweiss and all have all thrown their hat into the ring for getting a universal bank license, but the Reserve Bank gave only two, if you remember, the license to IDFC and to Bandhan. Thereafter, we saw differentiated licenses in the form of a payment bank license, a small bank license, but universal banks that have no restriction on what they can do. Payment banks cannot give loans, they can take deposits. Small banks have to give 75% of their loans in the ticket size of 25 lakhs or less. So, these banks come with restrictions. Unrestricted license as given to IDFC was something a lot of banks, NBFCs hungered for. But now the guidelines are on the website of the Reserve Bank. I'll just quickly read them out to you. Okay, they're pretty complex. The key aspects of the guidelines include resident individuals, professionals having 10 years of experience in banking will be eligible to promote a universal bank. Large industrial houses are excluded. So don't expect a Tata Bank, Reliance Bank, Birla Bank. That's not allowed. I guess that'll be disappointment for the AB Birla Group, but they've got a payment bank license along with IDEA. Another third rule, which is important, non-operative financial holding company has been made non-mandatory in the case of promoters being individuals or standalone promoting or converting entities which do not have other group entities. I think this will be good for Shriram Transport. Shriram Transport had not applied for a license because they did not want a separate holding finance company and a non-operative holding company and separating their current NBFC business. So maybe, just maybe, I'm telling you prima facie, this may be good for the Shriram Transport types. Not less than 51% of the total paid up capital of the non-operative holding company shall be owned by the promoter group, instead being wholly owned by the promoter. So the promoter group can own at least 51%. And not less than 51%. The existing specialized activities have been permitted to be continued from a separate entity proposed to be held. Again, this is very important. Let me read that out to you. Existing specialized activities have been permitted to be continued from a separate entity proposed to be held under the non-operative finance company, holding company. Again, let me specifically refer to the example of Shriram Transport. They were asked to take away their NBFC company into another unit, which they were unwilling to. Sorry, the other way around. They were told that the NBFC cannot do the same thing that the bank is doing. Now they have allowed. So I think that all these proposals are going to mean that people like L&T Finance and Shriram Transport will throw their hat into the ring. Well, there is a lot about eligible promoters. Like I told you, 10 years experience guys can say that they want to start a bank, but conglomerate, that is business conglomerates, business families, large industrial houses cannot throw their hat in the ring. The fit and proper criteria, of course, will have to be passed by everyone. And the holding structure has become somewhat more easy now. The minimum capital requirement, as it was for IDFC, shall be 500 crore or 5 billion rupees. And foreign shareholding in the bank will be subject to the same policy as is currently applicable. That is minimum aggregate shareholding is 74%, that is including FII and FDI. That's about some of the rules, and we don't know whether these are final guidelines. I would assume they are. I think Ashwin Parekh is with us to talk about this. He's, of course, a veteran observer of the banking scene. Mr. Parekh, what did you make of what I could read? I could read out some of the eligibility criteria to you.
Yeah, in fact, I was examining the same. Now, this is in keeping with the draft, let's say, guidelines that were issued earlier. More or less, very clearly saying that the corporates or the business houses cannot really apply for a bank. But at the same time, professionals, particularly if they can really either raise 500 crores or existing NBFCs. So this is a very natural, nice way for professional NBFCs who are not a part of any business conglomerate or a business house to really get into banking. So at least this was a requirement earlier also, if we recall, when 24 applications were received for universal banks, and then of course at that point in time only 2 licenses were approved, IDFC and Bandhan. But even at that point in time, one felt that there had to be a way for professional NBFCs who are large enough, to become a universal bank, to have some way of moving, and migrating into the banking system. And this seems to be a good path. Certainly 74% right away, because the original draft had thought about a little lower level for foreign equity participation, but 74, that is putting it at par with the others, with the other existing banks, is I thought a very good move, I must admit.
Okay. You think, even this non-operative finance company, holding company, in cases where they don't have too many units, they are saying that you can dispense with a non-operative holding company. For instance, IDFC could have become an IDFC bank. It doesn't have to have a separate non-operative holding company according to the current guidelines. Also, they don't have to transfer their current NBFC business to the bank. It can be pursued in the NBFC. That seems to be the impression I'm getting. That will mean Shriram Transport gets a look in. I'll just read that out to you. Well, the non-operative financial holding company has been made non-mandatory in the case of promoters being individuals or standalone converting entities which do not have other group entities. So, I don't know, this will mean that a Shriram Transport can become a Shriram Transport bank, Mr. Parekh?
They can, except that they have to then move the entire NBFC into the bank, because that's a converting entity.
I am not sure. I'm not very sure. I thought I saw another rule saying that need not be done. Just listen to this. Existing specialized activities have been permitted to be continued from a separate entity proposed to be held under the NOFHC, subject to prior approval from the Reserve Bank. Now, would that be called specialized activity financing transport vehicles?
No, well, actually, we'll have to see the guidelines a little more clearly. But, Latha, the point of view that RBI always had, even, earlier also when the applications were being examined, or when banking companies wanted to float NBFCs, the principle was that RBI does not want the final customers to be at any disadvantage. So they say that if NBFC and banking companies are competing in regards to their product offerings, then in that case, it creates an arbitrage against the customers.
Yeah, so you think they will expect, for instance, the Shriram Transport Group to transfer the NBFC to the bank. Going by what I read, you don't think they will be allowed to keep that as a separate entity?
Not really, because it's not considered as a
specialized okay.
Banking regulation
so let's read it very clearly. Existing specialized activities have been permitted to be continued from a separate entity proposed to be held under the NOFHC, subject to prior approval from the Reserve Bank, and subject to it being ensured that similar activities are not conducted through the bank. Yeah, there you have it. So I don't think Shriram Transport gets any relief.
No, they can, because see, under the Banking Regulation Act, 18 or 19 businesses that a bank can really carry out, can conduct, are very well specified. So even when I was looking at the same rule, my mind was immediately drawn, the attention was drawn to that.
Okay, so who do you think will qualify at all? The Reserve Bank has been a little wary of allowing broking entities to get banking licenses. So, considering that the rules look very similar to what we were given to understand when IDFC and Bandhan got their licenses, Do you think right now any of the brokerages, Edelweiss, the Motilals, the IIFLs, India Bulls, do you think any of these will qualify, or do you think the Reserve Bank will well, I think we've got Ramesh Iyer. Okay, here's a potential candidate. Ramesh Iyer of M&M Financial Services joins us. Ramesh, I know if at all you could, it would have been a very quick read, but the on-tap licenses are here. Could you get a glance? Do you think that now it's only a matter of time before we get an M&M Financial Bank?
I thought my quick reading, possibly I thought industry houses are not eligible.
No, they are not.
Yeah, so therefore it's not us as a candidate.
Okay.
But surely I think this is one move towards getting, players who may want to look at banking as more attractive than NBFC is.
Who do you think then will apply? Do you think there will be individuals who will want to start a bank? I don't know, I have to ask Mr. A.K. Purwar if he would be still interested. But do you think, who do you think will qualify, given the qualifications?
I don't know, maybe, small NBFCs possibly may want to look at, while of course the capital requirement is a little steep from a smaller NBFC perspective. But maybe they would like to partner with someone. I somehow think there could be some partnerships which may emerge out of this. Maybe a small NBFC and maybe another brokerage house or whatever, in the sense, someone who's wanting to put in capital and someone who has a reach to go deeper, because there are some branches required for rural,
Yes.
kind of a reach, etc. And therefore, I can see somewhere maybe some partnerships may emerge out of this.
Ramesh, do you think there will be so much of a craze for a banking license? I mean, now we have, in the last 3 years, about half a dozen payment banks who will, although 2 or 3 of them have called it off, there will still be perhaps 5 or 6 who will go ahead. And then small banks, you will have about a dozen of them. And then you have those 2 new universal banks. Is it really that lucrative to have a banking license now? You NBFC guys seem to be doing better.
One, of course, the comparison between NBFC and bank, one may think one model is better than the other. But from a banking point of view, if, various formats that is emerging, and if we all definitely want to look at how India is going to progress from here on, and if all those smart cities and, many rural kind of population would get included into the credit stream, and all of that considered, and somebody who's got a very clear focus on what's the kind of model they want to develop, then of course one may look at bank as something that will be attracting them. But if someone is running a good NBFC, which is also equally important from the growth perspective for the country, one may want to think twice whether, even if eligible, whether they want to convert from an NBFC into a bank.
Okay, so you don't expect Reserve Bank to be flooded with too many requests at this window, too many potential candidates at this window?
I'm not too sure I'm in that position to kind of give any number out there, but clearly there would be a lot of interest. There are small NBFCs, there are brokerage houses, there are various financial intermediary formats. So there will be people who will be looking for, definitely. So I don't know how kind of crowded that space is going to be, but interest levels, I guess, will be high.
Okay. But purely from a business point of view, is it a huge regret that you all will not qualify because you are a conglomerate?
I think that's maybe, yes, one of the reasons, but, even in the earlier rounds, there were other regulatory limitations because of the reason why we didn't even make an application then. So I think we as M&M Finance will always look at overall things. Of course, the criteria of selection, once the regulator doesn't allow, then of course it's gone. But otherwise also, we would look at it very clearly, the weightage between running an NBFC versus a bank. How will we really add value? What differences will we make? And then what are the overall regulatory framework that is giving that space and attraction? So all of that is what we will do.
So I just stay on for a minute. Ashwin Parekh has also been speaking with us. And of course, he's a long watcher of banks from his previous avatars as well. Mr. Parekh, do you think the sheen has worn off from bank licenses? By the time they have come on tap, not too many people are going to queue up, and the advantage of having a license is a little less these days?
Yeah, actually, you see, 2 things, I can read out of this. One is I think that the entire reform is more towards professional bankers who actually were a part of, let's say, foreign banks or large private sector banks, and who are in a position to really raise capital through funds here or through funds outside of India, because if you're going to get 74% of the equity by way of, let's say, foreign participation, then, those are the... So, I mean, already, for example, there are two people who are talking to me. They've given me the mandate, when the draft guidelines came out. Both of these are professionals, one with a foreign bank and a US-based foreign bank, and the other one was earlier with a European-based foreign bank. And both of them have showed keen interest, and they have, in fact, tied up in some form this mandatory capital also.
Okay.
So, I mean, and then the guidelines seem to be actually suggesting that professionals who are in a position to put up this 500 or mid-sized NBFCs, but purely run by professional, let's say professionals, not a part of any conglomerate or not a part of any business
foreign
unit.
banker. Should I read Vikram Pandit? Who's given you the mandate?
Well, I can't disclose now because...
Well, I mean, it makes eminent sense that a person
make.
like Vikram Pandit should want to start, since he knows this game so well. But do stay on. Ramesh, I'm coming to you as well in a minute. Sunil Kanodia of SRE has joined in. Mr. Kanodia, what have you made of this rule? Do you think the rules are easy enough to elicit a lot of response?
Well, I think it is consistent with the RBI policy that they didn't want a window open, close like that, but for the banking system to have an on tap. So whenever anyone who is eligible and fit and proper as per RBI who applies, they can open up. So I think that's a good policy framework which is there. However, what I believe in and what we have stated in the past from our chamber, also from ASSOCHAM, that what is required to review the guidelines which are there for the present private sector banks, the old private sector banks which were there.
Yeah.
Today you can't have a shareholding more than 5%, then you have to get approval.
Now it is 10%. Now it's 10% by the current
rules. You need an approval after 5 to keep up to 10%. So I think for the existing, because many of these existing banks who are there, small private banks, they can grow. So existing capacities which are there. So I think what is required is many of the RRBs are there, many of the cooperative banks are there. So there must be some policy framework which can unleash many of these, give opportunity, open them up so that they can grow, access new capital, fresh capital can come in. Just the way you're doing for new banks, and create a mechanism. So I think that is very much required, apart from for new banks.
Okay. Well, Ramesh, just a final question before I let you go. What's your sense in terms of, I mean, the same question that I asked Ashwin Parekh, and in a sense asked you maybe tangentially, is it a very big thing to get a bank license now? I mean, you've got the UPI, the Unified Payment Interface. Things are going to get very, very disruptive in the banking space. So is it going to be that attractive when Kotak and Yes got it?
See, ultimately, banking formats are not short-term or medium-term play. One has to have a very, very long-term vision of where do they want to take the bank to. And if that kind of a blueprint is drawn, I guess yes, because we are in a country which is kind of continuing to grow and will continue to grow, and many, many more people will need to be brought into the banking system. New opportunities in banking will open up. Technology is just one disruption as we see, but I'm sure there will be many more on the product design side, etc. So therefore, from a long-term perspective, clearly, I think if somebody has a very, very long-term vision, I guess it is still an attractive space.
Okay. I'll just read out this rule to you on NBFCs and in terms of eligibility. That perhaps will define which of the current NBFCs will be eligible. It says, of course, individuals who are residents and have 10 years experience can start. Entities in the private sector that are owned and controlled by residents and have a successful track record of 10 years, provided that if such group has total assets of 50 billion, 5,000 crores, and the non-financial business of the group does not account for 40% or more in terms of gross income. Only those people will be allowed. That is, you should be largely a finance company. Not more than 40% of your terms, of your money, should come from non-finance holdings. Just to put it the other way around, existing NBFCs that are controlled by residents and have a successful track record of 10 years, for the sake of clarity, it is added that any NBFC which is a part of group that has total assets of over 5,000 crore and that the NBFC non-financial part of the business accounts for 40% or more is not eligible. That's being made very clear. So you should not have non-financial business contributing more than 40%. Digant Haria of Antique Stockbroking has joined us. Digant, who do you think in the current space look like eligible candidates?
I think clear candidates are these brokerages, these diversified brokerages, the Edelweiss and the IIFLs and the Motilals of the world, because I think they fit in whatever criteria you just read out. And they have been structuring their business in a way which offers a wealth management service, a lending service, everything that a bank would probably want to offer. So I think those are the primary contenders. I don't think the others like the gold finance or the vehicle finance are in any hurry for the license, because anyways the banking model is slightly restrictive for their kind of a business.
Do you think Capital First will fit in?
Yes, it definitely is eligible and it could fit in, but I think even they are in the business where I think a few years they would want to tap more customers and
I'll tell you why. RBI's historical record has been, it's been wanting to keep banking and broking separately. You know the kind of pain Axis went through when it took over Enam, and the Reserve Bank wanted to ensure that Enam's directors don't become Axis's directors. There have been repeated attempts by RBI to keep broking business distinctly separate from banking, which is why, do you think the chance lies for the Edelweiss, the Motilals and the IIFLs, or is the chance a little brighter for pure NBFCs like Capital First or which else? Shriram Transport, I thought.
Yeah, Shriram Sundaram. See, the thing
Sundaram,
is that
absolutely. Cholamandalam. Do you think it will be that variety who are not really very big in broking?
Yeah, so chances for them are really bright. In fact, I could go on record and say that if those guys apply, they would surely get it. But the thing is that I don't think they are in a hurry. Our interactions with them tell us that they are in no hurry to consider universal banking. See, now with everything which is changing, the strategy of everyone is becoming customers. That you get a customer and try and the strategy is customer. It's not a banking license anymore. When the days when Kotak got the license, the banking license itself meant a lot of things. I think now that line has got a little blurred, and everyone is out there to first capture as many customers as they can, and probably not spend 2 years of their life right now just living up to the new regulatory requirements of a bank.
Okay.
So I think those guys would definitely get it, but they may not be equally excited for it.
You will bid up tomorrow. You will buy which set of companies or put a buy on which kind of companies on the basis of this on-tap license rules?
I think the NBFCs are anyways on fire. So
you bet. Oh, you bet. You should just pull up
I think
the
the
share
ones who are doing
prices
good should do good.
Well, Bajaj Finance will not be entitled, obviously, because they don't want conglomerates.
Yeah,
so,
same goes for L&T Finance Holdings. I think that
but
is
why
the
should
one.
L&T Finance be? It's not a conglomerate. In the sense, it's a widely held conglomerate. It's not a family-owned conglomerate.
Yeah, but I think you
L&T
read out
Finance...
one rule where 40% of your income should come out of non-lending. So I think L&T's income would be much higher than the L&T Finance income. So
Okay, so tomorrow L&T Finance could fall, you think, on this news?
I think somewhat yes, because they have been building the company just like a bank, and I think they wanted a bank license more badly than anyone else.
Yeah, and it appeared that they would have even got it. Do stay on. Naresh Pakhijani, the partner and head financial services at KPMG, is also with us. Naresh, what's your sense? Repeatedly, I see this word, resident individuals having 10 years experience. There were a lot of individuals who applied. If you remember, I think Bala, the former Infi employee, Suresh Senapati, All these guys had applied for the small bank licenses, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think all these guys start applying now?
Sorry?
Do you think that a lot of individuals will apply? How many eligible candidates do you think the Reserve Bank will get?
I think, as you rightly mentioned, people do have aspirations, and I'm sure that they will reapply, because if you look at it, in the past also, when people were not successful, when this tap was opened way back in 2001, only Yes Bank, few banks got it. Then, the applicants who were not successful in 2001 reapplied in 2013. There were some of them who also applied for small finance banks.
Yes.
So all I'm saying is people will keep applying till they get a reply from the Reserve Bank of India. So my sense is, I would not say that, people will stop from applying. People have aspiration to get into banking, so I think it will continue to attract applications.
And who do you think are the more likely winners? We just had Digant Haria telling us that he expects all those brokerage companies and NBFCs. So, well, I'll just read out the list for you. The Motilal Group, IIFLs, Edelweiss, Indiabulls Group, who else? The Shriram Transport Group, Capital First. These were the names he mentioned. Are these the likely candidates according to you? Naresh? Okay, I think we're...
No. So all I'm trying to say is that if you look at it, some of the names which you just mentioned, they did apply for universal banking license.
Yep.
For a variety of reasons, they were not successful. As I said, some of them reapplied for small finance banks.
That's right.
Again, some of them were successful, some of them were not successful. So my sense is that, and even if you look at it today, you have 2 universal bank licenses, Bandhan Bank and IDFC Bank, and then you've got close to 10 small finance banks. Now the market seems to be already flooded, right? And if you look at from an RBI point of view, they are now willing to issue licenses and all. But, from the fate of those 3 payments bank licenses, people who have withdrawn.
Yeah.
So I think all I'm trying to say is people will have to really think through their business plan and strategy. How do they differentiate to be successful in this over-flooded market?
All right. No, I think so. That was my sense as well. Now you have a regulator who may be willing, but a market that may not be as enthralled by licenses. And those who are enthralled by the licenses may not make the RBI test anyway, probably because of the fit and proper rule or the RBI's old, conservative filters before it gives a banking license. Nirmal Jain of IIFL is also with us. Mr. Jain, hi. Actually, your name has been mentioned as one of the most likely potential applicants for on-tap license. Is that right?
I can't comment on this actually. We'll take the guide. We'll read and understand the guidelines because it's something we are serious business.
Not helping, sir. Mr. Jain, we'll just dial in yet again. It's not a very good line. Ramesh, before we let you go, your final thoughts. It's likely that the guys who have applied before are going to apply again, and everyone knows RBI's filters. Do you think many people will make the grade?
See, now the filters will be applied, obviously. So someone who's applied earlier will kind of relook at what are the new guidelines, and I'm sure some of them will. And as I said, it's someone who's got a very clear long-term plan in the new format is the one who will want to apply for, instead of just because the licensing is opened. I don't think people will apply. They will apply only if they have a very clear long-term business plan and will compare to what they do and what's that plan. And therefore, that will decide who wants to come in and invoke. Those will be the player who will look at this new opportunity.
All right. Mr. Iyer, thank you very much for your patience and allowing us to redial several times. P.H. Ravi Kumar, the non-executive chairman of SKS and a former banker, both first ICICI and then I think Bank of India before that, joins us now. Mr. Ravi Kumar, I don't know if you had time to read the RBI's guidelines. Familiar rules. Individuals.
But I have the headline.
Oh, you have the headlines with you, which says conglomerates cannot.
Yes.
And in the case of an NBFC, at least 40% of the business should, not more than 40% of the money for these businesses should come from non-financial activities, which perhaps removes, companies like MMFSL. In any case, going by the Reserve Bank's prior behavior, do you see this as a huge liberalization? Many people will come into banking?
I don't know whether many will come into banking, but it is a huge liberalization. Because I know if you see in the last 35 years, licensing has happened only once in early 90s when the new private sector banks came.
That's right.
Thereafter, we have 2 or 3 individual licenses which were given on an ad hoc basis, not as a part of a structured licensing policy. Therefore, I would say it's a huge liberalization. And since corporates and those who do not, who have large, other than financial business are not eligible, I think the number who would be eligible would not be very large. I would say it would be anywhere not more than, I'm talking of serious players, would not be more than some 25 to 35. It is in that range.
Sorry, 25 to 35?
Groups. I'm taking entities or groups. Who are serious, who have certain level of minimum mass, critical mass.
Because who will qualify for a license, you think?
Absolutely.
Okay, 25 is quite a number. Actually, we already have about 66 banks. I take your point that this could be treated as a huge liberalization on the part of RBI. I would think that the last 2 years itself are periods of huge liberalization in banking. I'll just recount the numbers purely from memory. 1994, the first set of 7 licenses were given to private sector banks. That's when you had your ICICI, HDFC Bank, Centurion Bank, UTI Bank, and a few others who, of course, could not, Global Trust Bank, and a couple of others who did not convert their license. Those were 7. Then in 2003, you had 2 licenses, Kotak and Yes. Then in 2014, you had 2 more licenses, IDFC and Bandhan, and then came the flood of 8 payment banks and 11 small bank licenses in 2015, and now in 2016, free for all. Anyone who wants can apply, but not conglomerates, but not people who are getting a large part of their money from non-financial business. One potential eligible candidate has once again joined us, Nirmal Jain of IIFL. Mr. Jain, you think now you will get a walkover, a walkthrough?
No, I can't comment on that. In fact, we'll study the guidelines and take it to our board first, now whether it makes sense for us and whether we fit into it. So it's too premature to conclude that, is a walkover and will, So most certainly we had applied in the first place when the original universal banking guidelines had come and we didn't get the license. But a lot of things have changed in terms of digital landscape, in terms of regulatory environment. So we need to take it to our board and then take a call on that.
Okay.
I mean, it's board's prerogative, so I can't comment on it.
All right. But Mr. Jain, what is so different in the rules? I mean, you may have an idea why the Reserve Bank did not give you the license at that time. How come you will qualify more now? Anything that's changed?
So at that time, they gave only 2 licenses and they were Bandhan and IDFC.
Yes.
So both the licenses, both the companies, they were very, so one was into microfinance. Both the companies where there's no prominent promoter or no prominent, private sector interest in that. So I think what has changed since then, that this time industrial houses are out. So at least RBI has taken a clear call that it is a very controversial whether industrial houses should be given license or not. I mean, as we know that industrial houses are net borrowers and there can be conflict of interest for a variety of reasons. So I think that at least
that's, I think, a given in India's case. We have never favored that. So that is not a surprise.
I think, when they rejected the applications of some 23 applicants, including ours, they very clearly said that, the rejection letter itself said that you will be eligible for applying whenever guidelines are again announced or when new guidelines come. So I think that is not a deterrent for any of the earlier applicants.
Okay.
Maybe that time, the things were changing politically and, somehow they just gave a couple of licenses and stopped there. It wasn't a wholehearted opening up of the sector.
I agree with you.
Like more
I agree with you. Several opposition parties had even said that the Reserve Bank perhaps should not give a license simply because it's so obvious now that there is a regime change. I can imagine they must have been more conservative. But just stay on for a minute, Mr. Jain. V. Vaidyanathan, the chairman and manager of Capital First, has also joined us. Mr. Vaidyanathan, I think your only issue will be how to put that 5,500 crores together. And then yours will be the first candidate in the list into RBI's post box?
I think you're running a bit ahead of its time, of your time, because, in our case, we have foreign ownership, which is substantially more than 50%.
Okay.
So,
but 74% is allowed.
Yeah, I know it's 74%, but I think we got to look into a lot more factors. I told you earlier in one of our programs that we understand very well that the opportunity is very, very large. We also understand that India is hugely underbanked, and therefore there's a huge step forward. But as far as our company is concerned, we've got to wait and see a large number of other implications as well.
But is it all that lucrative now? Aren't NBFCs making more money? The environment is a little less restrictive for you guys. Is it really so mouth-watering or tantalizing to have a bank license?
Well, I do agree that, the space is really very good. Funding is very much available. And the opportunity is so very large in terms of penetration and so on, and the last mile connectivity that NBFC is able to give. So any which way you look at it, the space is right now quite good.
Which one, NBFC or bank?
NBFC space is really very good, and I think it can last, comfortably as far as the book size is concerned, even up to 80-90,000 crore, even a lakh of crores. Even the existing license can very well take you. But if you take a very longer term picture, a stable deposit license is indeed very good, because it almost makes a financial institution almost perennial in terms of its growth opportunities.
Okay, so should we understand that when your AUM gets closer to 1 lakh crore, Vaidyanathan will apply?
We don't know, but certainly we will keep an eye out at all points of time.
Okay, Mr. Vaidyanathan, the Reserve Bank has been traditionally a bit wary of marrying broking and banking. I go back to the Axis NAM case where RBI took a long time to work out the details of the merger and wanted the broking pieces to be separate from the banking pieces. So do you think NBFCs, which have large broking entities, are probably at a disadvantage?
Well, that's been the thinking for a while. But, if I read the fine print of this particular one, this one tends to suggest that they like financial services. And in fact, they're saying that, look, your earnings from non-financial services should not be more than X percent.
I agree, but that has always been the case.
It's always been the case, but I think that seems to be the predominant focus. I do not seem to hear them say that if you're in broking, you will not get it. No.
Actually, Kotak had a decent broking business. So I'm not saying that it was disallowed, but RBI had a preference for non-broking NBFCs. So
I know we talked about it, but I'm not too sure that RBI is particularly biased against broking entities. I have a feeling that that probably they're also bracketing them with financial services. And I have a feeling that most of the broking entities of late have started figuring out how to do lending businesses rather than just stay broking.
Yes.
So I do think that I think they stand a pretty good chance, in my opinion.
Okay, so you expect a decent list of candidates. The space is already crowded. And if you looked at this result season, NBFCs have done far better than banks. So is it really so good to jump the fence?
As I said, for any institution to be everlasting, so to say, which everlasting meaning 20, 30, 50 years, if you got to take a very large lifespan for yourself.
They're usually banks.
I definitely believe that a banking license helps.
Okay.
And I think the second big factor to note is that I think everyone understands and recognizes that the underpenetration is just too huge. The existing banking system will not be able to maybe gather the required amount of capital to power India's growth at 8-9% for 20 years from now. It certainly looks stretched. So new banks will bring in new capital, will bring in new talent, and will address the niche areas. If there's one factor that will improve the penetration issue in India, it's only going to be the influx of more banks. Absolutely. Existing system is not going to be able to sustain such sort of a growth and penetration that we desire.
All right. Well, that's reposing your faith in banks. Banks have not really rendered that last mile very well. Maybe now because of Jan Dhan they're being forced to. And of course, my sense is payment banks will provide the last mile, maybe a little better than even the banks. But Mr. Jain is back with us. Mr. Nirmal Jain, you don't worry that broking will be seen by the Reserve Bank as a bit different from banking. You don't think that will be seen as a disadvantage?
Not really. Most of the banks have broking subsidiaries. So
yes.
If Reserve Bank has any problem with broking, then all the large banks have broking subsidiaries, and so this is a part of the capital market.
Yes.
I don't think that's a concern. And in any case, if you look at our business mix, then broking is less than 10%, maybe less than, not just about 6-7% of our business.
All right. Actually, well, just one final question to Mr. P.H. Ravi Kumar. Mr. Ravi Kumar, you said that there would be, you wouldn't be surprised if you saw 35 more licenses, is it?
No, 35 applicants.
Applicants. How many more licenses do you think this industry can stand? We already have 66 players now. I'm counting all the payment bank and small banks.
Actually, in the small bank and similar space, I think we need at least 2 dozen licenses,
Ooh.
25 licenses. Because today in the financial services, I believe money is there to be made only in the customer segments around poverty line and the lower income group.
Okay.
If you look at take case of the housing finance companies, I don't know whether you have noticed that in the last 3 months to 6 months, and currently on the anvil, there are 20 groups which have brought in or committed $500 million of capital just for housing finance.
Yes.
So therefore, that space is large, will need more licenses, and therefore the choice between applicants is whether to be a small bank or to be a universal bank or not to be a bank at all and be just an NBFC.
All right. In that case, Mr. Vaidyanathan, 100 banks in about 4-5 years?
Pardon me, I missed your question, Latha.
At the moment, we are 66 number of banks, I think, if I'm not mistaken, give or take 1 or 2. Do you think, I'm counting all the potential licensees as well. Do you think in the next 5 years we would be 100 banks?
I definitely believe so. I think, I must give you one benchmark so that will maybe reorient your thinking on this front. US has close to about 8,000 banks, Latha, for 300 million people. 8,000 banks, and not one of them is stoned. So when you look at it, therefore, when you're talking of 1.25 billion people, even 50, 60, 100 is still low. I do think for the last maybe 40, 50 years, progressively we should have added a lot more banks, but it's better late than never.
All right, Mr. Vaidyanathan, Mr. Jain and Mr. Ravi Kumar, thank you very much for joining me. This very enlightening conversation. It's a huge change, and before I forget, this also means that Raghuram Rajan redeems the last of the promises that he made in his September 4th, 2013 speech, where he said the logical conclusion would be to put bank licenses on tap, and today that promise has been redeemed. The banking space has become truly liberalized, you would say, that you don't have to wait for 10 years for a committee to sit and another committee to sit, another committee to sit, a discussion paper becoming a draft guideline paper, a final guideline paper, and then a series of committees. No, it is on tap. That's a huge liberalization of the banking space, truly a revolutionary day for the banking industry. And as our guest said, in the next 5 years, we could quite easily be looking at 100 banks. But the last warning that came from one of the guests, let's remember that India doesn't allow its banks to fail. As of now, if there is a run on a scheduled commercial bank, if you remember the Global Trust Bank experience, the FISC and the RBI have come and supported. So the FISC and the Reserve Bank will give only that many licenses as they can support, because they have not allowed a bank to go under. We have not allowed a bank to fail. And therefore, that ability of the government and the Reserve Bank will itself be a constraint to how many new licenses will be issued. That said, a major liberalization day today. The banking sector stands liberalized. The moment, the 1991 moment for the entire Indian economy is for the banking sector today delicensed completely. Take it away, Areeb.
Right, Latha. In fact, it could be the title to a new book, perhaps. Big or small, you're not allowed to fail. So, in fact, thank you so much for joining us for that entire conversation. I'll try. So thank you, Latha, for taking us through that entire...
Headlines come from Latha, Arif. I was, in fact, while Latha was speaking, I was furiously typing out the headline, Raghuram Rajan redeems his promise, liberalizes the banking sector. Latha, you've given us the headline for the evening.
No, I wouldn't be surprised that you will get many more headlines in the days to come, because my sense is, and we had the Deputy Governor, former Deputy Governor, just retired Deputy Governor H.R. Khan on Indianomics, and he said that quite a few things are in the works, even for the corporate bond market, including probably Reserve Bank allowing corporate bonds to be purchased by the Reserve Bank in its LAF window. So perhaps, of course, this is a landmark decision by the Reserve Bank, and Rajan redeeming his promise. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the next, 3 weeks of, that Rajan remains, you will get more dramatic announcements.
All right, on that note, we are going to take a break. There's more breaking news that we're coming right